Well, here we go. Well, this week, as you can see, we're going to drape the whole boat in some white. We're actually cutting and fitting the fiberglass to get ready to actually epoxy the fiberglass in place. So here we go. You can see there I got my little fiberglass rack. I've got 3 racks there. I got some 1808, which is what we're putting down right here. There's some 1208, I think that's on the top up there, and then there's some 10 ounce that we're going to also be using on the boat on the inside. So what we're doing here is the plans call for this for the fiberglass to run on the outboard side of that chine right there, and then to overlap 4 to 6 inches from the center line. Well, I kind of had a dilemma here because I didn't want to cut off a big long stretch of that fiberglass there just so I could have 4 or 6 inches of overlap. And even though it only cost me more epoxy, and I know there's some drawbacks to that, I just felt like it was in my best interest to, or the decision that I made was to just keep the fiberglass as whole as possible and trim it down at the front. And I went from like a 10-inch overlap to 8-inch to a 6-inch to a 4-inch. So the angle wasn't real good on that forward camera to be able to see it. But that's what I'm doing is I'm working up there on the front. And so what I decided to do is I was just going to leave that overlap as wide as it was. This is 50-inch fiberglass, so I got a pretty good bit of overlap there. But you know, like I said, it's just a little bit more epoxy. So I just got that little speed square there, and I'm trying to, you know, mark out the front side so that I can match it up and try and make it, you know, make it as uniform as possible so that it fares easy and all that. So here it is. I'm marking out to cut that glass on the outside part of the chine all the way to the front, and then on the front side you can see where I've made my marks there. And here we go. I just got those little electric shears there, and that's where you can see I just decided to cut off that front side, leave the rest of it with that big long overlap, and then here where I'm going over this center section of this bow, or this forward section of this bow, where you got pretty good little dead rise right there, had to cut a couple slots in it. And you can see here where I'm just following my line I made on the outside of that chine and on the bottom of the hull, and that gets me the width. And then I'm going to come around here back and forth and back and forth, but I left myself with a good 6 inches of overlap there on the end, rolling onto the transom. So that gives me, in some spots, you know, that gives me at least 2 layers or 3 layers at a minimum on that rear section there. So what you can see me here is I just trim that off tight right there, roll up the excess, and now I'm just trying to figure out how I want to lay it. So that one run right there goes all the way from the very, very tip of the chines. It comes and rolls over the end of the transom. So, and then I have to figure out where my overlap here is. I got to cut another little relief cut right here, because where that dead rise comes up and then it flattens out right there on the pad, it makes that fiberglass a little bit wonky. So what I did was I just kind of made a cut in it, overlapped it, marked it, and then kind of cut out that little wedge so it'll lay flat. And keep in mind that another piece will be overlapping that. This was real valuable for me, is to put these reference lines on here. So, you know, you can make it as uniform as you want. I just use the length of that little speed square or whatever, finishing square, whatever it is, and I made marks on the fiberglass and on the side of the boat, so that when I unrolled this after I had the epoxy down, I knew exactly where it needed to go, and I marked both sides just so as I was unrolling it, I knew that I was going to be right forward, because I started from the transom coming towards the bow. And so here I just roll my little rack over, and once again I keep my rack of fiberglass there. I keep it inside the shop there where it's not in any dust. Not, you know, it's protected from the weather and everything else. And you can see here where I'm marking the outside part of that chine, and then this gives you a better angle of how much overlap it is. And like I said, I didn't want to just, you know, because that cutoff there, I'm gonna have to find a place for it or whatever. But in my mind, it would all be just waste. So for where I'm at in this part of the project with this 1808, so I've just marked off the center line to get my overlap, and at a minimum I have 4 inches until I get to the very, very tip where those chines come together. And And the same thing here on this other side, as I'm marking it off, and I say I'm making me a little line there. I'm gonna have 6 inches of overlap coming from the bottom of the hull onto the transom, and I just cut that off clean, roll it back up on my roll, figure out how it, because that side panel, now you can see the side of the hull there, it's going to come and wrap onto the transom. I'll show you that here in a little while. And now it's just taking and using my little shears there, my little electric shears. You see how I kind of have to twist it sometimes, because either the battery's getting dead or I've been using these shears, and this 1808 is pretty thick stuff, so sometimes the battery gets a little low and it'll kind of hang up, or you just turn and kind of go backwards, and you'll kind of cut yourself out of a bind where it's hung up on it. It works pretty good. You know, they're probably not the best in the world, but for the price, you know, they've been able to do it. Now you can see from this angle, you can kind of see where I make those relief cuts to help that fiberglass kind of lay flat right there. And once again, I'm making all my little reference points, and as I was unrolling this glass, I used those reference points. I was very, very happy to have them, because I had it marked. You know, you saw earlier I had it marked where the transom line was, where the little through holes, where all the stuff was. So I had reference. You know, I knew I could orient it where it needed to go, and that was extremely valuable, especially in the front on the bow, because you know, as you're unrolling all this, you know, you're gonna have a wet layer of epoxy down there. And so it gets kind of hard to move, and if you're like me, the stress starts ticking because you got that epoxy curing and all that stuff. So it's good to just have those points of reference so you can reassure yourself of where you are. So here it is. I'm grabbing that 1208 from the top, and that's actually going to go on the hull sides. So I'm just pulling it, and it just worked out real good having that fiberglass on this rolling cart, or whatever you want to call it, little rack. And that's just some scrap lumber that I had, and some old pipe, and I think that top one is actually a paint roller that's holding up that other stuff just to stretch it across there. And it worked out pretty good. And the same thing here. So with this side glass, it actually goes from obviously the bottom, from this angle, from the bottom, and it overlaps into the chine, where the transition of the chine and the whole bottom is. Whatever terminology may not be exactly right there, but you can see right there where it comes up. So on that chine, it actually, the bottom glass and the side glass actually overlaps. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm trying to make me a line down through there. You can get a little better idea of what it is here. So that's where I'll make the cut here coming up. And once again, here on the bottom, I'm just making sure that I leave myself a couple of inches below the bottom. Well, the way that it's oriented right now, but below the bottommost part there. So that if I need to move the glass up, pull it up. This 1208, it's got a little bit of stretch and bend to it, you know, more than that 1808 does, but it's still pretty rigid as compared to like that 10 ounce or whatever. So here I'm trying to figure out how to cut it, where to cut it right, so that it can turn up and lay up on, you know, and cover that corner right there on the side. So that once that covers, once again, I rounded that over and overlapped it, you know, 6 inches on the transom as well. So you'll see how that comes out here in the end. But it's ought to give me good doubling, you know, effect right there, and completely seal that corner and edge and everything else. And all of these little offcuts like this, especially with that 1208, I tried to keep all that because I may be able to use some of that on the inside of the boat, because the inside of the hull sides, the cover, there's probably a better term for it, and I'm just brain dead right now. But I'm hoping that I can use that glass that's left over, those cut off parts on the inside of the boat. If not, I can use them on the console, or, you know, be able to use them somewhere, either that or in the manufacturing of live wells or whatever. So here we go. This will be the last piece that actually because there's such big layups, there's actually only four individual pieces of fiberglass that go on the bottom. And once again, you know, pull it down, overlap it on the bottom, and then come back and make that overlap with the hull glass on the inside of that chine. So that chine is actually 2 layers of glass. It's 1808 against the wood, and then that 1208 on the top. Yeah, once again, I cut it off flat right there at the end where the chine is, and then I just turned it around the corner flush, measured 6 inches, and then cut it off right there. And once again, I'm putting all these reference marks in there, and I can't reiterate, like if I had to do this again, I would make sure that I put more reference marks just because I used them that much. And now as I roll all this stuff up, I've thought about, okay, well, how do I want to lay this stuff out? And I always wanted to start with the wider piece. I wanted to lay it out first, and that's where all those reference points and all, I keep coming back to it, but that's the way that I rolled them up so that I would know how I wanted to lay them back out. And it was just my best guess, and that's why I did it the way that I did. I knew that as long as I got those wide pieces situated, that I could kind of move those more narrow pieces around. And there I'm marking the glass, and I wrote on the bottom of the boat, you know, to make sure that I got the right piece. And so that's what we're going to do here, and see all this stuff going down before too long. Well, with the holidays and everything that happened, I kind of got away from being able to produce some videos, spend some time with the family. So, you know, this one's going to be a little short, but we're going to come back and you know what the next step is, and that's when we're going to start opening a bunch of jugs and knowing what's coming. It's very interesting. So thanks for following along.